The Indiana Fever's social media team thought they had a slam dunk, a Women's History Month tribute to head coach Stephanie White, her playing career, her accomplishments, her inspiring journey. They hit post, sat back, and waited for the hearts and celebration emojis to roll in. Instead, they got absolutely destroyed in the comments. Within minutes, fans were pulling receipts, dropping screenshots, and asking one very specific question: why did you leave out Vanderbilt? Because buried in that carefully curated timeline of achievements is a 5-year stretch the organization desperately wants you to forget. A period that tells a completely different story about Stephanie White's ability to develop young talent and build a winning program. The post went up 3 hours ago, and the comment section has turned into a full-scale investigation. Fans aren't just complaining, they're bringing data, statistics, and film breakdowns. And what they've uncovered raises serious questions about whether the Fever are being honest with their fan base or just hoping everyone has a short memory. Let's break down exactly what the Fever left out and why it matters for the future of Caitlin Clark and this franchise. The Indiana Fever's official account dropped a multi-slide carousel celebrating Stephanie White's best. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. Basketball journey. The graphics were clean, the photos professional, the messaging inspirational. Slide 1, get to know head coach Stephanie White. Slide 2, her playing career highlights from Purdue, including the 1995 Gatorade Player of the Year Award and USA Today Player of the Year recognition. Slide 3, the 1999 National Championship. Slide 4, her 2023 WNBA Coach of the Year Award with the Connecticut Sun, complete with a photo of her holding the trophy. The final slide featured an inspirational quote from White herself about mentoring and developing the next generation of leaders in women's basketball. On the surface, it looks like a standard celebration post, the kind of content teams drop during Heritage Months to highlight their personnel and build positive engagement. The Fever's social media team probably expected a few thousand likes, some supportive comments from fans, maybe a retweet from the league office. What they got instead was a masterclass in how modern sports fans do their homework. The comment section immediately filled with questions, not vague criticism or trolling, but specific, detailed inquiries about a conspicuous gap in the timeline, 2016 to 2021. 5 full years of Stephanie White's coaching career, completely absent from the tribute. The top comment asked directly, why isn't Vanderbilt mentioned? Another fan posted her complete record at Vanderbilt with a simple question mark. A third comment included a link to the athletic department's statement when they fired her, highlighting the phrase, needed a change in direction. Within an hour, the post had more comments than likes, and almost none of them were positive. Basketball analysts started weighing in, pointing out that omitting a 5-year head coaching stint isn't an oversight, it's a deliberate choice. The Fever weren't celebrating Stephanie White's full career. They were celebrating the parts of her career that support the narrative they want to tell, and fans immediately recognized the difference. Let's talk about those missing 5 years. In 2016, Vanderbilt University hired Stephanie White as their women's basketball head coach. On paper, it made sense. She was a Purdue legend, a former WNBA player with championship experience, and someone who understood what it took to compete at the highest levels. Vanderbilt was rebuilding their program and needed someone with credibility to attract recruits and establish a winning culture. White seemed like the perfect candidate to turn things around. That's not what happened. Over 5 seasons at Vanderbilt, Stephanie White compiled a record of 46 wins and 83 losses. That's a winning percentage of just 35.7%. But the overall record doesn't tell the full story. When you look specifically at her performance against SEC competition, the numbers get significantly worse. In conference play, she went 13-54. 13 wins in 54 games against the teams she needed to compete with for recruits, rankings, and tournament berths. That's a conference winning percentage of 24%. Under her leadership, Vanderbilt didn't make a single NCAA tournament appearance. Not once in 5 years did the program reach the postseason that defines success in college basketball. The 2019 to 2020 season was particularly brutal. Vanderbilt won just 7 games the entire year. 7. Think about what that means for a program's culture, for player morale, for recruiting pitches to high school athletes. When you're winning 1 out of every 4 or 5 games, you're not building towards something, you're struggling to survive. The COVID-affected 2020 to 2021 season brought more of the same, and in April 2021, Vanderbilt made the decision to move on. The athletic department's official statement said the program needed a change in direction. That's corporate language for fundamental failure. They weren't tweaking the approach or giving her more time to develop her system. They were acknowledging that the experiment hadn't worked and wouldn't work. This wasn't ancient history from the early 2000s. This was recent, relevant coaching experience that directly relates to her current job. And it's completely absent from the Fever's Women's History Month celebration. That omission is what set off the firestorm in the comments, because fans understand what it means when an organization selectively edits someone's professional history. To Stephanie White's credit, she didn't let the Vanderbilt failure define her career. She returned to the WNBA and took an assistant coaching position, working her way back up the professional ranks. In 2023, she became head coach of the Connecticut Sun and promptly won Coach of the Year after leading the team to a 27-13 record. That's legitimately impressive. The Sun were competitive, disciplined, and effective on both ends of the floor. White earned that recognition through solid game planning, strong defensive schemes, and managing a veteran roster. Nobody can take that achievement away from her. But here's where context becomes crucial. Coaching professional athletes who've already reached the pinnacle of their sport is fundamentally different from developing college players or young WNBA talent. When White took over the Connecticut Sun, she inherited a roster of established veterans who knew their roles, understood professional systems, and had years of high-level experience. Her job was to organize that talent, make tactical adjustments, and manage personalities. She wasn't teaching fundamentals or developing raw potential. She was optimizing what already existed. The Indiana Fever present a completely different challenge. This is a young roster built around generational talents who are still developing their professional games. Caitlin Clark just finished her rookie season. Aliyah Boston is in her 2nd year. These aren't veteran players who can run complex systems automatically. They need coaching that develops their strengths, puts them in position to succeed, and adapts to their unique skills. That's much closer to what White was asked to do at Vanderbilt than what she did in Connecticut. And we know how the Vanderbilt chapter ended. The question Fever fans are asking isn't whether White can coach. The Coach of the Year award proves she can in the right circumstances. The question is whether she can develop young players, adapt her system to fit elite offensive talent, and build a program around skills that don't match her preferred style. Connecticut didn't require those abilities. The Fever absolutely do. That's why her college track record matters, and that's why omitting it from her professional timeline feels dishonest. You can't evaluate whether someone is the right coach for this specific job without looking at the last time she faced a similar challenge. This is where the rubber meets the road. Caitlin Clark is the most dynamic offensive talent in women's basketball. She revolutionized the college game with her range, creativity, and ability to create offense from nothing. She's a generational player who should have an entire system built around maximizing her unique abilities. Instead, Fever fans are watching her play off the ball in slow-paced, grinding sets that limit exactly what makes her special. That's not fan exaggeration. That's what shows up on film. Stephanie White built her reputation as a defensive-minded coach who values structure, ball movement, and limiting opponent possessions. That philosophy worked perfectly with Connecticut's veteran roster that could execute complex schemes and grind out wins in half-court settings. But the Fever's biggest strength isn't half-court execution, it's offensive firepower. led by a player who needs freedom to operate. When you force Caitlin Clark into rigid offensive sets and play her off the ball, you're neutralizing the exact skills that make her elite. It's like having a Ferrari and using it exclusively for grocery runs in a school zone. The comments on that Fever post reflect what fans see every game. One wrote, "She better let CC play her style this year and quit playing her off the ball. What a waste of talent." Another said, "I don't care for her style. Slow down play, running garbage game, keeping CC off the ball." These aren't casual viewers throwing out hot takes. These are people who watch every possession and see a fundamental mismatch between the coach's philosophy and the roster's construction. Film analysts have pointed out the same issues. Clark's usage rate is lower than it should be for someone of her caliber. The offensive sets don't create enough movement to free her up for the shots she thrives on. The defensive scheme is solid, but it comes at the cost of transition opportunities where this team should dominate. Then there's the Luka Doncic comment. Stephanie White actually said on record that the Dallas Mavericks moved the ball better when Luka sat. Anyone who understands basketball analytics knows that's objectively wrong. Luka is one of the highest usage, most efficient offensive players in basketball. The Mavericks' offense craters when he's on the bench. That comment reveals something important about White's basketball philosophy. She values ball movement over individual offensive creation, even when the individual creator is generationally talented. The parallel between Vanderbilt and Indiana is impossible to ignore once you see it. At Vanderbilt, Stephanie White was tasked with building a program, developing young talent, and competing against superior SEC competition with a roster that wasn't ready for that challenge. She had 5 years to figure it out, to adapt her system, to find what worked with the players she had. She never did. The record speaks for itself. 46-83 overall, 1-3-54 inches conference. That's not a program building towards something. That's a program stuck in a system that doesn't fit. Now look at the Indiana Fever situation. She's coaching a young roster that needs development. She's facing superior competition every single night in a WNBA that's more talented than ever. And she has generational offensive talent that doesn't naturally fit her defensive-first, grinded-out philosophy. The circumstances are different in some ways, yes, but the core challenge is remarkably similar. Can she adapt her preferred system to maximize the talent she has, rather than forcing that talent into a system that limits their best qualities? At Vanderbilt, the answer was clearly no. The 2021 firing came with that revealing statement about needing a change in direction. Athletic departments don't use that language unless there's a fundamental philosophical mismatch. They weren't saying White needed more time or better resources. They were saying the approach itself wasn't working and wouldn't work no matter how much time passed. That's a damning assessment of a coach's ability to adapt and develop. And it happened just 4 years ago, not in some distant past that's irrelevant to who she is now. Fever fans pointing this out aren't being unfair or dwelling on ancient history. They're asking a legitimate question. If she couldn't develop college players and adapt to their strengths at Vanderbilt, why should we believe she can suddenly do that with young WNBA players? The Connecticut Sun experience doesn't answer that question because it didn't require those skills. She coached veterans in a system they could execute. That's completely different from what the Fever need. The Vanderbilt years are the relevant comparison point, which is exactly why the Fever left them out of that social media post. They know it raises questions the organization doesn't want to answer. The Indiana Fever didn't post this tribute randomly. The timing is deliberate and strategic. They just won the 2025 WNBA Commissioner's Cup, which gave the organization a positive news cycle and bought Stephanie White some breathing room with fans. Winning a mid-season tournament isn't nothing. It's a real accomplishment that proves the team can compete at a high level. The front office wanted to capitalize on that momentum by reinforcing White's credentials and building public support before the regular season grind intensifies and criticism potentially returns. But By leaving Vanderbilt completely out of the timeline, they created the opposite effect. Instead of controlling the narrative, they handed skeptical fans a smoking gun. The omission was so obvious, so deliberate, that it immediately raised questions about what else the organization might not be telling the truth about. It felt like gaslighting. Don't trust what you remember about her college coaching record. Just focus on these carefully selected highlights we're showing you. Modern sports fans don't accept that approach. They have Google. They have basketball reference databases. They have institutional memory and the ability to verify claims in seconds. Within minutes of that post going live, fans had pulled up her complete Vanderbilt record and were posting it in the comments. They found the firing announcement and quoted the key phrases. They dug up the Luka Doncic comment and linked the video. This is the Streisand effect in action. By trying to hide something, the Fever organization drew far more attention to it than if they just addressed it honestly up front. A post that was supposed to build support for the coach instead became a referendum on whether the front office is being straight with the fan base. And that matters beyond just this one social media mishap. If the Fever leadership is this committed to protecting Stephanie White, despite legitimate criticism, what does that say about their willingness to make necessary changes if results don't improve? Are they more invested in being right about their coaching hire than in maximizing Caitlin Clark's prime years? Because Clark won't be in her early 20s forever. The window for building a championship team around a generational talent is short and unforgiving. You can't waste years hoping a coach eventually figures out how to use that talent properly. Let's look at how other organizations have handled similar situations when it became clear that a coach's system wasn't maximizing generational talent. Successful franchises make adjustments quickly. They either adapt the scheme to fit the talent, or they change the coach. They don't double down on a failing approach just to avoid admitting they made a hiring mistake. The history of professional sports is full of coaches who were brilliant in one context and completely wrong for another. There's no shame in recognizing a mismatch. The shame comes from recognizing it and doing nothing. The Golden State Warriors built their entire system around Steph Curry's unique skills, rather than forcing him into a traditional point guard role. The Dallas Mavericks eventually surrounded Luka Doncic with the right pieces and coaching staff after initially struggling to maximize his abilities. These adjustments happened because the organizations prioritized winning over ego. They asked themselves honestly whether their current approach was the best way to utilize the talent they had, and when the answer was no, they made changes. The Fever's social media post feels like the opposite of that mindset. It feels like circling the wagons and defending the status quo, rather than honestly evaluating whether changes might be necessary. And the concerns fans are raising aren't emotional overreactions. Watch the film breakdowns from serious basketball analysts who have no rooster in this fight. They're pointing out the same tactical issues. The offensive sets don't create enough movement. Caitlin Clark's usage rate is too low for someone of her caliber. The defensive scheme is solid but comes at the expense of transition opportunities where this roster should excel. These are legitimate tactical observations, not fan complaints. And they echo exactly what happened at Vanderbilt, where White's preferred system never adapted to the talent available, and the program paid the price with 5 years of losing basketball. The difference is that at Vanderbilt, the stakes were tournament appearances and recruiting classes. With the Fever, the stakes are the prime years of a generational talent who could define the franchise for a decade if properly utilized. That raises the urgency considerably. The Fever don't have 5 years to figure out whether this approach will work. They need answers now. Here's the distinction that keeps coming up in those comment threads, and it's worth examining closely. Stephanie White has proven she can achieve success with the right roster. Connecticut was a real accomplishment that demonstrated her ability to game plan, make adjustments, and manage a competitive professional team. But achievement with ready-made pieces is different from development of raw talent. The Fever need both, and only one is proven in her track record. Caitlin Clark and Aliyah Boston aren't finished products who just need tactical deployment. They're young players, still developing their professional games, learning the league and growing into their full potential. That requires coaching that meets them where they are and builds around their evolving skills. It requires flexibility, adaptation, and a willingness to adjust your preferred system when it conflicts with your best players' natural abilities. Those are development skills, not just achievement skills. The Vanderbilt years tested exactly those abilities. White had 5 years to develop young players, adapt her system to the talent available, and build something sustainable. The program went backward instead of forward. The SEC record got worse over time rather than better. Players didn't develop into conference competitive performers under her system. That's a development failure, pure and simple. And it's recent enough that the lessons should still apply directly to her current situation. Connecticut didn't test those skills because it didn't require them. The Sun had veteran leadership, established culture, and players who'd already developed their games. White inherited a functional program and made it better through strong tactical coaching. That's valuable and impressive, but it's not the same as building something from young pieces. The Fever needs someone who can do both, and we only have proof she can do one. This is why fans keep bringing up Vanderbilt despite the organization's attempt to memory hole those years. It's not about dwelling on failure or being unfair to White's overall career. It's about asking whether her skill set matches what this specific job requires. If the answer is that she's excellent at managing veteran rosters but struggles with young developing players, then the Fever have a problem. Because this roster is young, developing, and built around players who need the system adapted to them, not the other way around. The Indiana Fever can keep posting carefully curated tributes that omit inconvenient truths, or they can engage honestly with the legitimate questions their fan base is raising. But here's what they can't do. They can't make 5 years of losing basketball at Vanderbilt disappear just because it complicates the narrative. Modern fans do their homework, and they've already done it here. The receipts are public, the record is clear, and the parallels to the current situation are obvious to anyone paying attention. Stephanie White couldn't develop young talent or adapt her system at the college level when given 5 years to prove she could. Now she's coaching young WNBA talent that doesn't naturally fit her preferred philosophy, and fans are watching the same patterns emerge. The Commissioner's Cup win bought some time, but it doesn't answer the fundamental question about whether this coaching hire maximizes what could be a championship window with Caitlin Clark. Either the Vanderbilt record matters or it doesn't. Either development skills are required for this job or they aren't. You can't celebrate the Coach of the Year award while pretending the 46-83 record never happened. They're both part of the same coaching career, and only one of them resembles what the Fever currently need. The comment section on that post tells you everything about whether fans are buying the selective storytelling. They're not. Stay locked with my channel, Simply Explained, for more update.